So when are you going to get your wand out?
I beg your pardon?
You know, your wand for your rituals.
Oh right, sorry, yeah. This is my wand, forged from sacred metals and blessed by the Dark Lords of the Nether Realms.
I didn't know the Dark Lords had started selling stuff on Amazon.
Better mind your P's and Q's, we're in the company of senior royalty this week, don't you know? The Queen of Wands has got to be one of the most confident, charismatic and vibrant characters in the tarot. She absolutely oozes class. You certainly won't find her drinking wine from a box. So we know that the fire element in Wands represents will and determination, and in the case of the Queen, we see that in its most sophisticated and feminine aspect. So far we've seen that the pages and princesses represent childhood, while the knights and princes represent adolescence. The queens in the tarot symbolise maturity and the receptive qualities of each suit. Now that's not to suggest that these concepts only apply to women. We all have masculine and feminine qualities, and as I've said before, one of the main goals of ritual magic is to try and bring these aspects together. Rachel Pollack says if we wish to apply the symbolic qualities to someone, then any court card can signify a woman or a man. The Queen of Wands is often taken as the social butterfly of the tarot, who's calm, confident, and maybe a little flirtatious.
Oh, matron.
On the Waite Smith card, we find a very regal-looking character. Waite says the wands throughout this suit are always in leaf, as it is a suit of life and animation. Emotionally and otherwise, the Queen's personality corresponds to that of the King, but is more magnetic. So he's talking about that fiery, passionate temperament we get with the wands, but magnetic in the sense that she draws people toward her thanks to her charisma and charm. She's holding a sunflower in her left hand, which itself is a symbol of happiness. Sunflowers are famous for turning their faces toward the sun, and for this reason they're taken to represent optimism. They quite literally always look toward the bright side. In a spiritual sense, this can also be seen as the search for enlightenment. Now if you look behind the Queen, you can see a veil hanging down with more sunflowers on there. This takes me back to the veil that hangs behind the High Priestess back at number 2 in the Major Arcana. If you've seen that video, you'll know that we talk about how the pomegranates on the design match up with the Sephiroth on the Tree of Life, and this doesn't look too different. This is pure speculation on my part, but I think it's interesting that we've got the two sunflowers in the position of Hokmar and Binar, with a crown in the position of Keter, which actually translates to crown. In a sense, this would place the Queen directly between wisdom and understanding, which is also the path of the Empress. I really wish Pamela Coleman Smith had written her own account of these cards when she painted them, because Waite didn't go into too much detail about the minor arcana. I guess I'll never know if any of this was deliberate or just me putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with a shoe again. Directly in front of the Queen we've got a black cat. Now I'm sure we're all aware that black cats are associated with evil and bad luck, thanks in part to Pope Gregory IX declaring that they were an incarnation of Satan back in the 13th century. Sadly, it's because of this kind of nonsense that we find so many of them in cat shelters. Personally, I think they're gorgeous. They're like little panthers. Anyone who thinks a black cat crossing their path is going to bring them bad luck needs to sit down and have a word with themselves. Luckily, black cats are also taken as a symbol of protection and prosperity. As with all cats, they also represent fierce independence, which goes perfectly with the Queen of Wands. In the Thoth Tarot, we've got the usual fire all over the place, together with a very imposing queen looking down on us. According to Aleister Crowley, she's seated upon a throne of flame, ordered into geometrical light by her material power. Beneath the throne, the surging flames are steady. She bears a wand in her left hand, but it is topped with a cone suggestive of the mysteries of Bacchus. So Bacchus, also known as Dionysus, was the Greek god of wine, pleasure and general merrymaking. And instead of a black cat, this time we've got a full-on leopard. Crowley always had to go the extra mile. Again, this is another reference to Bacchus, who is often illustrated with a leopard by his side. This brings us back to that whole social aspect of the card. I think the Queen is the living embodiment of the phrase, eat, drink and be merry.
Why don't the other gods hang out with Dionysus? 'Cause all he does is whine! Ow!
The Sforza and Marseille cards both show the classic image of the Queen holding a wand. The Solar Busker has the Queen in profile and sat on a throne, upon which are written the letters DP. Maybe don't Google that.
Will the generations increase with the help of the products of vegetation?
Well, that's the burning question right there. I mean, will they? Come on, inquiring minds need to know.
The Hermetic title for the Queen of Wands is Queen of the Thrones of Flame or Queen of the Salamanders.
Now interestingly, this is the only court card in the wands that doesn't have a salamander on it somewhere. Obviously the Queen has a very individual sense of fashion and wants to stand out from the crowd when it comes to that sort of thing. However, the salamander theme lives on in the title, and in the case of the Queen that means the passionate and determined aspects of fire presented in a much more controlled and thoughtful way. Rachel Pollack says the Queen represents the yin or receptive qualities of each element. This does not mean that the Queens indicate weakness or even inaction, but rather the element translated into feeling or understanding.
The Queen of Wands corresponds to the zodiac signs Pisces and Aries.
So the Queen of Wands rules the zodiac wheel from the last decan of Pisces into the first 2 decans of Aries. We talked in the last video about how the court cards have multiple zodiac signs, and in the case of the Queen of Wands that means that she dominates the sign of Aries but with a little bit of Pisces thrown in too. This makes a lot of sense if you look at the signs themselves, as we've got the headstrong and fiery sign of Aries combined with the more emotional side of watery Pisces. However, both signs are considered to be creative, generous and pleasure-seeking, so when you put all of that together we get a pretty accurate description of this particular queen.
The Queen of Wands resides in the world of Absolute and sits at the 3rd Sephiroth of Bina, together with the 3 of Wands. The name of this Sephiroth translates to understanding.
We're back at Bina toward the top of the tree, where all of the queens live alongside the 3s. Bina is considered to be the mother Sephira, as a counterpoint to the father Sephira of Hokmar. According to Israel Regardie in A Garden of Pomegranates, the tarot cards appropriate are the 4 3s. Its symbol is the brooding dove, the true Shekinah or Holy Spirit. The letter of the tetragrammaton is the first He, and the tarot attribution is the 4 queens.
The Queen of Wands herb is raspberry leaf. This herb is an anti-inflammatory, which is also synonymous with self-love.
What?
But what does it all mean?
I think the most important aspects of the Queen of Wands to consider in a reading are confidence, charisma, ambition and leadership. She exudes a certain captivating energy and looks very comfortable in her own skin. Despite the calm exterior, she's also very determined and will not back down. Waite says divinatory meanings: a dark woman, countrywoman, friendly, chaste, loving, honourable. Also love of money or a certain success in business. Now the chaste part that he mentions doesn't really match up with any other interpretations of the card. Ones are very often associated with passion and sensuality, and I think we can see that quite clearly here. Rachel Pollack says her crown is flowering, her dress is sunshine. Alone of all the queens, she sits with her legs apart, signifying sexual energy. She's seriously straddling that throne. Puts me in mind of a certain Sharon Stone movie from back in the day.
Oh, for goodness sake, man, get a hold of yourself. Actually, no, don't get a hold of yourself. We've got a video to make.
Crowley's description of the Thoth card seems much more congruent with the general consensus. He says the characteristics of the Queen are adaptability, persistent energy, calm authority, which she knows how to use to enhance her attractiveness. She's kindly and generous, but impatient of opposition. She has immense capacity for friendship and for love, but always on her own initiative.
It heralds an abundant harvest, predicting that you will have much fun in the next country party, which you will enjoy with a lot of people.
Tallaula was definitely a guy who liked a party, and this is yet another excuse for a hoedown.
If we read for a person of advanced age, this card predicts great satisfaction and a very happy old age.
Sounds like good news for you, Monty.
Ha! Would you listen to the sheer brass neck of the man?
As with the other court cards, the reverse queen can mean the more negative aspects of the fire element. Waite says opposition, jealousy, even deceit and infidelity. Now in the Thoth tarot, Crowley doesn't really mention reversals directly, but he does talk about the flip side of each card. He says the other side of her character is that she may have a tendency to brood, come to a wrong conclusion thereon, and react with great savagery. In many ways, we can look at the reverse queen as an overreaction to the struggles we often face in life. Rachel Pollack says too much disaster or too much oppression and a nasty streak can emerge. She can become deceitful, jealous, unfaithful, or somewhat bitter.
When this card is in the reverse, it announces the good we want to do, but without being able to.
Yeah, I would love to help you move house, but unfortunately I've broken both of my legs in a cooking accident. The big takeaway for the Queen of Wands is a charismatic and independent leader who epitomizes the fire aspects of will, strength and determination. Queen Elizabeth once said, "When life seems hard, the courageous do not lie down and accept defeat. Instead, they are all the more determined to struggle for a better future."
Thank you for joining us once more on Kippy's Quest. May the coming days bring you passion, independence, and the confidence to like this video and subscribe to our channel. God save the Queen.